If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. People, what's a horrifying, creepy experience or story you have heard or lived through? When I was maybe 19 or 20, I nearly got run off the road on my way home from work one night. There was no actual accident, but it shook me up, so I pulled off on the shoulder to calm down before continuing to drive. A windowless van pulled up behind me, and a man got out and approached my car. He asked if I was okay, and I told him I was fine, just gathering myself after a scare. He offered for me to wait in the van with his wife and kids. He insisted multiple times that I get in his van. Luckily, my door was already locked, and I had only cracked the window to speak with him. Since he parked his van right behind me and I could see in my rear view, there were no visible passengers in his van. My house is surrounded by woods and swamps. I remember one night my dad called me outside and excitedly said, "Watch this." He grabbed a wooden rod and banged it against our towel rack. About 10 seconds later, a similar noise came from the woods. It wasn't an echo. Someone, or something, Dad claims Bigfoot was out there communicating with us. Creeped me the duck out. I fell asleep one night in my apartment, as usual. I had a dream where there was this repetitive clicking sound. I remember in the dream yelling, "Stop it." And the noise stopped. But it was really hard to stop it. In the morning, my alarm went off, I opened my eyes, and my bedside lamp was on. It was off when I went to sleep, no doubt. I jumped out of bed and searched my place to make sure nobody was in there. It was still locked up tight. I walked to my bedside lamp and turned it off slowly, and as I twisted the little switch, it made the click that I'd heard in my dream. It turns out something was turning my lamp on and off in the middle of the night, right next to my bed, and stopped when I probably yelled in my sleep to stop it and left the light on. My husband has a man in the corner story from when he was a kid. His sister has the same recollection. They grew up in rural Minnesota. Their house was a converted one-room schoolhouse that his grandmother attended and bought when she and her husband began a family of their own. Unfortunately, my husband's grandpa died from complications of a leg amputation before my husband and his sister were born. When my husband and his sister were between the ages of 3 and 7, they had an evening ritual of saying goodnight. Not every night, but some nights, before they went to bed, they would insist on saying goodnight to the man in the corner. Of course, their mom and dad didn't see the man in the corner and sort of just shrugged it off as a thing kids do. When my husband was around 7 or 8, the family was looking through an old photo album. Both he and his sister paused on the same picture and said, "That's the man in the corner." Their mom told them that it was their grandpa who died before they were born. From that moment on, the man in the corner never showed up again, and they stopped hugging the man in the corner. My stepdad went in for a routine back surgery. Just a simple one-night stay. That night, around 11 p.m., my mother and I were sitting in our living room, and we saw my stepdad peek through our big window. He was always a practical joker, so we assumed he got out early and was going to try to scare us. We went outside to look for him. We both walked around a different side of the house to lessen the chance that he would scare us both. We couldn't find him, so we went back and checked the house. He was nowhere to be found. So we decided to let him do whatever he was planning and returned to the living room. Not even a minute later, the phone rang. It was the hospital. A new nurse had misread the dosage for the morphine he was receiving for pain and gave him 10 times the suggested dose, killing him instantly. The dose was administered just before we saw him that night. I had nightmares for months about seeing him in random locations but never being able to catch up to him. When I first moved in with my now husband, we were sharing an old house with a few other people. I'd been warned several times that there was a little girl ghost in the house that people often saw at the top of the stairs to the second floor, but she never bothered anyone, and no one had ever seen her anywhere else. I'm sort of on the fence about supernatural things, so I just brushed it off. After a couple of months of living in the house, my husband and I were in our room, and I was in bed, and he was sitting at the computer desk at the end of the bed playing games. One minute I was lying in bed, talking to my husband about something, and in what seemed like the very next moment, I was looking through the doorway to one of the upstairs bedrooms. Except that instead of me looking into the bedroom of the girl that was currently living in that room, I was looking at a little kid's table that had 2 chairs, one occupied by a teddy bear and the other by a little girl in a white dress with a black sash. The little girl turned to look at me, and she had solid red eyes. Then she said, "My name is Samantha," and there was this loud rushing noise, and I was back in bed. And my husband was still finishing the sentence he'd been saying before I left the room. I scared the ever-living out of me. Once I explained to him what had happened, he made me describe the little girl, and apparently she looked the same as the one that people had seen at the top of the stairs. Now I'm more inclined to believe that I fell asleep for half a second and dreamed that whole thing, but it wasn't like any dream I'd ever had or have had since then, and I still get a shiver just thinking about it. One night, I was sitting on my computer in my living room with my dog sleeping next to me. Now, from the chair I was in my living room, I can see into the dining room and then into the kitchen. In my house, you have to pass through the dining room to get to the bedrooms. For an idea of my thought process here. Anyways, I had seen shadows pass by that way a few times, but I just figured that it was my eyes playing tricks on me and my peripheral vision. But on that night, things were quiet until my dog suddenly woke up and started barking and growling in the dining room. I look over, wondering if maybe someone in my family was coming out of their bedroom and startled her or something. At that point, a dark shadow zipped past that way, towards the other room, thoroughly scaring the shit out of me and further aggravating my dog. I had no idea what it was, but it definitely wasn't just my eyes because my dog saw it too. Creepy as duck. And it was moving too fast to be a person, too big to be a bat or something. About 6 months ago, I had come home from work very late and laid down on my ottoman, with my back to the closed French doors leading to the dining room. I started falling asleep, and I could feel the paralysis setting in, so I tried to fight it, but I ultimately lost, and my body became paralyzed, and as soon as that happened, I felt it. Anytime I suffered a paralysis episode, there would be a thing or entity that would enter my room. I can only describe it as monster-like. The majority of the time, I couldn't see it with my eyes, but I could feel its presence and knew it was there, and it would manipulate things in the room. I have only seen it 3, maybe 4 times. On this particular night, I could feel it behind me in the dining room, but since my back was to the doors, I could not see it. But then I hear the door opening slowly. It was a slow, long creak. At this point, I'm freaking out, trying to fight the paralysis as the door continues to open slowly. After what seems like forever, I'm finally able to move again, and I jump up and turn around, and the French doors are wide open. This is the part that freaked me the hell out. Supposedly, you hallucinate during sleep paralysis, and last time I checked, hallucinations cannot manipulate the real world. I did not sleep at all that night. I've had all types of scary hallucinations due to the paralysis in the past, but they've never been anything like that. I used to live on a farm a few years ago. One night, the power went out, and it was total silence in my house with my brother. Me and my brother used to sleep in the same room, BTW. As minutes passed, me and my brother started hearing strange noises outside, like someone was running around. One of the windows was open, and my brother gasped because he saw someone staring at him outside. He described it as a black head with glowing eyes. The other morning, my mom told us that she had a nightmare during the night about a tall, dark figure entering our home to snatch us. Weird and spooky coincidence. Years ago, something knocked 3 times on my bathroom door, and nobody else was home. I was in the shower, and I always felt the need to shut and lock the door when I showered in that house. I had a feeling of being cornered in that bathroom. The weird thing is that it was a brand new house. I thought maybe it was my SO playing a prank, though it was way too early for him to be home from work. I jumped out and quickly got dressed, but he wasn't home. He sat on the driveway until he got back. Also, in the same house, I woke up in the middle of the night one time to my dog standing over me in the bed and staring out into the living room, growling. This was a goofy, happy dog who never met a stranger. Not a watchdog at all. And the fact that he didn't get off the bed or go check it out was creepy as hell. He eventually laid back down but seemed on edge. Needless to say, I stayed in bed and didn't face that doorway. This isn't so much scary as just weird. When I was younger, I would ride my bike down the street to my friend's house. One day I passed this teenage girl right out of my driveway walking, and I remember she looked so sad. I got to the end of the block and turned the corner, and she was at the end of the street when I had just passed her by my driveway. I was so startled that I fell off my bike and cut my leg pretty badly. She didn't even look at me, she just kept walking with her head down. It was so weird. I walked to my friend's house, and they patched up my leg, but his mom didn't believe me. I'll never forget it. I don't know if it was a ghost of some kind of glitch in time, but I know I didn't make it up. One night, I heard my dad come in, lay down on the bed, and get his CD player going. I even knew what song was playing. Well, I was just listening along with the music, and all of a sudden the music stopped. I was really confused, but I tried to rationalize it as maybe the CD player's batteries died. But then I heard the bed creak like someone was getting into the bed. My dad started to threaten this thing by saying a whole bunch of horrible things. I pushed most of them out of my memory, but 2 of the things he said really stuck with me. I'll rip your heart out and feed it to a fox, and I'll use your blood to fill all the canteens in the army. I then heard the creak go away, and I really had a hard time getting to sleep. When the morning came, I looked down and saw that the other bed was empty, and no one was there. I went out to the living room and saw my parents were both still in the clothes they wore the day before. My dad had never gone to bed that night. My mom started dating this guy about a year ago who tells ghost stories all the time. He lives in an extremely rural area, and one of his stories is about this dirt road near his house. He's been taking people down this road for years to show them this. The story goes that a long time ago, a man was walking near this road in the winter looking for his missing daughter, and he froze to death walking through a swampy area before he found her. So last winter, myself, my mom and brother, and some of my friends went down this road as a joke. The road itself is terrifying enough. It's mostly dirt, one lane, and super hard to get across at night. On one side, there's a tree line, and on the other, it's a huge open field. There are no lights, no power lines, and no signs of civilization until you get to the end of it. There's a certain place where you stop your car, turn it off, count to 10 in the dark, and when you turn it back on, this thing, a ghost that is supposed to be the man in the story, appears and walks across the road in front of you. When we turned the car back on, a very clear human figure appeared, crossed the road in front of us, and then disappeared. And guess what? We were stupid enough to go back and mess with it some more. So about a year later, we go back down the road again. At this point, some of the group was saying it was all in our heads the first time anyway. We couldn't remember where to stop, so we just guessed at it. When we turned the car back on, this thing with a bleach white featureless face walked up to the rear car window right next to me, and we all lost it. It left the biggest handprint I've ever seen on the window. We tried to match it to one of ours, but it was huge. When we drove off, it was still standing on the road, watching us go. Both times, nobody was aware we were going to this road, and it's at least a mile away from any house. It wouldn't make sense for a person to be crouching in the grass, waiting for cars to come by and stop. We also took a video the second time we went, and although it didn't catch the thing coming up to the window, you can clearly see that nothing is hiding in the grass. You can also very clearly hear us all screaming like we're about to die or something. Just thinking about that road creeps me out now. There were many weird experiences I've had as a child, all in the same house. Most of them I could explain away. This one, however, was one I could never explain away, and to this day, I try to tell myself it never happened. I was about 11 years old, sleeping as soundly as ever. I remember waking up, but I wasn't really awake, it felt like a dream. I started to sit up and then got to my knees, reaching my arm out to the shelves above the foot of my bed. These shelves were the kind that just sat on L brackets that were attached to the wall. Anyway, I was reaching out, and just before I touched it, it shot out, hit the wall across the room, and fell to the floor. I wasn't afraid, I wasn't surprised. I felt nothing. I just laid back down and went back to sleep. The next morning I woke up, and before opening my eyes and looking around, I remembered my dream, but when I turned over, I had seen my shelf on the floor with my dolls and ornaments scattered about. I put everything back to where it was and tried with all my might to push or pull that shelf out like it had in my dream, and the L brackets would move slightly and stop it. It's hard to explain. But that was the last straw and what made me move into the unfinished basement, which usually should have been the most scary part of the house as a kid. The first night in the basement, I woke up at about 3 a.m. and saw two girls standing in the light of the doorway. I have never had another experience like that since. The scariest part for me was the waking up, as I didn't feel like it was a dream but more like a trance. I felt like I wasn't in control of my own body. When I woke up and realized it wasn't a dream, I was utterly terrified. When I was 14 or 15 years old in high school, my family was quite poor, and I didn't have a bed, so I slept on an old chair. My school acquaintance said that her family was getting rid of a bed and that I could take it if I wanted, and I accepted her offer. I got the bed a few days later and set it up in my room. I was excited to sleep on a real bed after years of sleeping on a chair. I'm not sure how many times I slept on it before returning to the chair, but it couldn't have been more than 5. I was experiencing insane nightmares and a really strange sense that I could see the darkness move when I woke up. I had a dream the night before that someone was mumbling something to me that I couldn't understand and sliding fingers down my back, and when I woke up, I heard the same talking super fast and odd guttural noises like an inch from my ear. I panicked and left my room for the night. I was sleeping on the couch in my living room when my mother came out and inquired as to what had occurred. I kept it a secret because I didn't want her to think I was insane. After about a week or two, my grandparents arrived in town. My mother decided that they could sleep in her bed while she slept in mine because I had returned to sleeping on the chair. I told her no the first night. She woke me up and asked if I was talking to her. The second night, She woke me up frantically and told me that she had heard someone whispering in another language in her ear and that we needed to leave the house right away. I explained to her that I thought the bed was haunted. She was upset that I hadn't told her before she slept on it, and that I didn't want her to send me to a mental ward. The next day, we sacked the house and took that terrible mattress to the landfill. I lived in an old farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. It was referred to as the Old Smith House. The name wasn't Smith, but it was common, like Smith. I lived there for several years and went to school in the nearby town. I made good friends with a kid in my grade, call him John. We had several classes together over the years. His last name was also Smith. One night I was sleeping and woke up to a man standing in my room. He looked older and wore overalls and a baseball cap, like an old farmer. I was too terrified to scream. I just sat up and stared. He smiled at me and said, "Tell my son I said I love him." Then he disappeared. I was so creeped out that I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. When I got to class the next morning, I looked and felt like crap. I took my usual seat behind John. He asked me what was wrong, so I told him. He stared at me, then asked me where I lived. As I told him, tears welled up in his eyes. The Old Smith place? It turned out he had lived there until his father died in the house. His mother couldn't manage the mortgage, so she sold it and moved in town to an apartment shortly after he died. His dad always wore overalls and a baseball cap, too. I am still getting goosebumps, just recalling it. One of the scariest things that ever happened to me was that, for a bit, my ex-wife and I lived in a haunted house. The house had been her mother's previously, and when she moved to another state, she gave the house to her daughter, my wife. Throughout my wife's entire childhood, she experienced weird stuff in this house, but of the things that happened to me, 2 of them are the scariest, and I'll share them here. One time, I was organizing things in my workroom when I heard a strange noise. I didn't think very much of it, to be honest, because we heard strange sounds a lot. When you live in a house with activity, you just learn to ignore things. Well, I didn't ignore it for long, because as I was organizing things, a metal box on the shelf across the room was thrown at where I was sitting on the far end of the space. I looked up just quick enough to duck, and it hit the wall so hard it left a mark in the paint. Another time, my wife and I were fooling around. We had been kissing and doing some foreplay when I finally decided to climb on top. As soon as I did, I felt something off. My wife saw the shape of someone standing in the doorway of our closet, and I looked back because she was honestly terrified, and I saw it too. A black shape, it looked like a man somewhere around my height, 6 feet 1 inch, and I was so terrified of the energy this thing was putting off that I screamed. We turned on the light, but there was no one there. The scariest will always be when this thing with just eyes chased the car I was a passenger in years ago. So, it was March 2006 when I accepted my roommate's invitation to go with her to visit her fiancé in Burns Lake, BC. I had just finished telling her that I didn't know why, but I was suddenly feeling like we needed to go faster now or something bad was going to happen to us. I honestly felt like we were going to die if we didn't get out of that area. I still can't explain it. She laughed it off till I started fiddling with my satellite phone and prepping to dial out just in case. I am not a panicky person, but I am also not stupid enough to ignore my instincts either. Regardless, we both said at the same time, "Does Moose have red eyes?" And that's when we noticed that the eyes were up in a tree. Whatever it was, it jumped, flew, or whatever, but suddenly it was behind us, and she started to go faster and pray. She was a born-again Christian, I am not. That's when I looked outside her window and just saw red eyes. First just one eye, then a second eye, and she started crying, and I started shouting to keep her damn eyes on the road and get us out of there now. Either we lost it or it just wanted to scare us, but we got into Burns Lake pretty damn fast. I was sleeping in my room with my mom sleeping on another bed. I was sleeping on the bed which was near the switches. I used my phone for around 1 hour. After some time I fell asleep. Everything was okay, but around 3 a.m. I suddenly woke up and I was just going to sleep again. I felt that someone came on my bed. I thought that it was my mother. She came to switch off the fan. After it suddenly, it felt like there was complete silence.
In room then, just in a second, I felt pressure on my back.
I thought it was my mother who came to switch off the fan, but after a few seconds, the pressure suddenly increased and it felt like something had just sat on my whole body. I realized it was something else. I felt like that for 40 minutes, and that thing started scratching my back. It felt so painful. I was not able to move even a single finger, and I was not able to say anything. But after a long time, it felt like that thing had just gone away. I felt normal, and I started hearing the sound of the fan again.
Just in a second, I cried Mom with all my strength and asked her if she came to switch off the fan and sit on my back.
She replied no. I checked the time on my phone, it was 3:50 a.m. I was feeling pain on my back, and when we switched on the lights and saw what happened on my back, it was all red and scratches on my back. From that day on, I never slept on that bed again. To be honest, I feel really lucky that my head was inside the blanket. But it never felt like sleep paralysis, and the scratches and wounds on my back were real. I have a somewhat strange one. I went hiking on the Pacific Crest Trail a number of years ago. It wasn't the whole trail, but a 20-mile section of it. I was with around 10 or 11 other people, and we were all very new to hiking, except for the leader. I signed up through my high school. It was an extracurricular to learn how to hike. Anyway, about halfway through the hike, we saw a beautiful lake at the foot of a mountain, about half a mile off the trail. It was going to get dark in about an hour and a half, and there seemed to be some good spots to set camp right next to the lake. We decided to go for it and set camp at the lake. The north end of the lake led straight into a small mountain with a little white cap, and just to the south sat a cluster of boulders about the size of a dump truck. The boulders were easy enough to climb and provided a nice place to chill that was just far enough away from the lake that the mosquitoes were not absolutely atrocious. As the stars began to shine and the sun set, I lay atop the boulders, staring into the sky, looking for shooting stars. There were 2 other kids on the boulders with me, just chatting back and forth. I wasn't paying any attention to what they were saying because the stars were so bright in the sky that it was beautiful to watch. Then, all of a sudden, a greenish, glowing lion creature appeared in the sky, like it had just morphed into reality. I was completely awestricken, as I really didn't believe what I was seeing. This creature looked like it was farther away than where planes fly, yet it was large enough for me to tell that it looked similar to a lion. It stayed in the sky for about 5 seconds before vanishing completely without making a sound, and it did not acknowledge my existence whatsoever. When I was a kid, I told my parents that I didn't like the people playing hide and seek with me in my room. One man kept hiding in my closet and would peek his head around to see me, which scared me. I asked them to stop. I was 5. One night, my parents heard me screaming at the top of my lungs, "They're real. They're real." I don't remember this at all, but they said it scared the shit out of them. When we moved into our new house, I knew the owners had divorced and there was bad energy in the house. The house felt heavy, and I could feel it weighing me down. I became really depressed and angry for no reason, and I wasn't acting like myself. I saged the house 2 times before we stopped hearing knockings and movements in the attic. We bought some second-hand furniture to fill our new house and noticed more things kept happening. My husband said he heard me call his name in the middle of the night, but I was sound asleep when he looked over. I also remember waking up in the middle of the night to see him leave to tend to our kids, who were still not sleeping through the night. I felt him come back to bed and lie down next to me. I woke up, and he wasn't there. When I asked him if he ever came back to bed, he said no, he was with the kids all night and fell asleep in their room. I've always had psychic dreams, nothing groundbreaking but definitely events that I couldn't have predicted that then happened days or months later exactly as I dreamed them. A few weeks ago, while walking my dog, I saw a robed figure sitting on a boulder on the edge of a field. It looked like a medieval monk with a long gray robe covering its head and long sleeves sitting with arms folded in its lap. I called out to it, not sure why, and it didn't move or respond. That night, I had a dream that I saw the same robed figure standing in a forest facing the tree. As I turned, I saw that the forest had 15 or so robed figures standing with their faces against the trees. The next night, I dreamed my daughter drowned in front of me, and I couldn't get to her no matter how hard I tried. That's it for now. I'm sure I'll have more. Most of these events or happenings don't scare me while they are happening, but shortly thereafter, when I've pieced things together. I was roughly 8 years old and lived in the hills of Appalachia in Tennessee, near Norris Lake. We had a 2-story house, the basement with a garage, a fireplace and wood storage, and a utility room with laundry. The second story had a kitchen, a living room, 3 bedrooms, and 1 bath. My dad was a single parent working at the metal factory. My sister was 3 years older than me and at a different school. We were the only 3 people living in the house. One day, near summertime, she had school and I didn't. Unfortunately, I had to stay home by myself. I was in the living room. I just made and ate some microwave food and walked into the living room to watch cartoons. As I lay on the couch, I noticed this, for lack of a better description, formless, semi-transparent white thing entering the room from the basement. It moved fast, and it was noiseless. It did not interact with anything in the room. I froze and couldn't move. It circled around the ceiling 5 to 6 times before retreating to the back hallway. I told my sister when she came home, but she didn't believe me. I don't remember bringing it up with Dad. That was the only time I've had anything close to an encounter with a ghost. Even then, I still blame my alone child mind. It could have been anything. It wasn't enough of an experience to make me believe. I still don't believe. I want to, but nothing has given solid proof that they do. I have even been to some pretty interesting places. As a police officer, I was called to an abandoned psychiatric facility. 2 kids were seen going in and never coming out. Went inside. All the equipment had been removed, and it was just graffiti and vandalized doorways left. I never found those kids, but I also never found a ghost. I had a 911 call from an abandoned house on CD, which apparently happens. No phone line, no power, nothing set up, and the address was correct. It could have been a dispatcher messing with me, but I believe it was just a disturbance in the existing taps to the property. Me and a few friends used to go to an abandoned mental institution. We used to set up scenarios where we would hide and either make sounds or noises to freak the other person out. Making crying baby noises, ghost sounds, etc. One time, we all went to the old nursing quarters. It was usually trashed windows boarded up with corrugated iron, broken glass, cupboards, and everything else that was broken up. This time it looked like someone had either gone nuts with red paint but there was Pentagon stuff everywhere, symbols on the ground. I totally thought some kids had been stupid, etc., just mucking around. We split up, and I went up the stairs with another friend. I found a mutilated rabbit, and as we passed by a window, I heard and tapped on the boarded up corrugated iron window. I laughed and tapped back on it. Tap tap tip tap tap, shave a haircut, and the other side tapped in response twice. My friend did the same thing. Tap tap, tip tap tap, opposite side tap tap. We laughed, assuming our other friends were doing that. We went down the stairs once done and went outside to find our friends. They weren't there, they came out from inside a few minutes later. I said, "Nice one with the window tapping, who climbed up there?" "Climbed up where?" I went outside and pointed to the window, assuming I saw a large ledge to support someone. Nope, there was no ledge, and there was no way someone could have remotely climbed up there. There were no open windows nearby, and our friends were downstairs and nowhere near that. It was cold, and both me and my friend knew something was tapping on the window. A couple of years ago, I stayed at a friend's house while visiting from out of town. He let me and my mother sleep in his room, and he took the couch. That night, I dreamt that I awoke and reached underneath the bed to pull out an Ouija board. I opened it up and saw the board, some paper, and a small, chewed-up black pencil. I reached in and grabbed the pencil. As soon as I grabbed it, demons flooded out of the box and started entering my body, graphic, by ripping my ribs out through my back. They possessed me, levitating me and throwing me around the room. I woke up right after this and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. My friend came in to see how we were doing. I told him about the dream and the Ouija board, and he reached under the fake bed and was like, "Oh, you mean this?" and pulled out the Ouija board. I pulled off the lid, and the chewed-up black pencil was there too. Needless to say, I will never use one of those things. I was roughly 7 years old. My grandparents lived in this house at the time. We had gone down for a week, for some reason. Vacation or something. In any case, to put things into perspective, inside the house was this large open hallway that ran from front to back. On the right side was this staircase, at the top of which was a door on your immediate right. On the left side landing, there were 2 or 3 doors, and then a final door on the left. The room colors were, if memory serves, red, right side door, green, blue, and then pink. In any case, I always had bad feelings about that red room. Something about it never sat well with me, to the point where I would run past it when going up or down the stairs. Something in there just terrified me. I don't remember all the details of the specific incident, though I do know it terrified my parents, but on one day on this particular vacation, I distinctly remember walking past that door. About an hour later, my parents came looking for me, only to find me sitting on the bed in the red room, staring off at a random spot on the wall. Years later, my mother noted that when they found me, I told them that the mean man said I had to sit there or else he'd hurt me. I'm 39 now, and it still sends chills up my spine, and I honestly have no memory of how I got into the room, when, or why. When I was younger, a group of friends and I were longboarding around a nature park near my house. This nature park had a lake that was bordered by a walkway on one side, with lights maybe every 50 or so feet. We were standing maybe 2 or 3 lights from the end, throwing bread into the water for ducks, when we decided to leave. So we started kicking. I'm at the back of the line when I turn around and notice standing in the beam of the last light, maybe 40 or 50 feet away, what looks like a woman in a white gown with black hair, walking towards us. She had her arms crossed as if she were cold. I watched her for maybe 4 or 5 seconds when she looked up at us and then set off towards us at a dead sprint. We start laughing, thinking someone is ducking with us, but we start kicking pretty hard. It's important to note that when you're kicking hard on a longboard, you can easily cruise at about 15 to 20 miles per hour. So we're all laughing or whatever, and then I turn around again. This woman is catching up to us. We had never seen someone run that fast for that long. We all panicked and began kicking as hard as we could. We were easily at 20 to 25 miles per hour at this point, and as we hit the last light, I dared to turn my head again to notice that this woman was only 15 feet behind us. Her features were exaggerated. Her arms were way too long, her hands were huge, and her fingers looked like they had extra joints in them. I couldn't see any detail in her face. But she was soundlessly keeping pace with my friends and me. The nature park had what we called the boardwalk, which connected it to the nearby subdivision of neighborhoods where I lived. We were kicking as hard as we could for it. She was maybe 5 feet behind me when we hit the wood of the boardwalk. As soon as we did, she just stopped dead in her tracks. We went maybe 50 feet down before we stopped and watched this thing. She stood there for a minute, and then she turned and walked into the tree line of the nearby woods, squatted behind a tree, and poked her head out, watching us. We promptly GTFO. My friends and I only ever talked about it once. It seems to me that wherever I live, some kind of paranormal phenomenon happens. I believe having any paranormal experience is a rarity, so having multiple in the different places I've lived shouldn't be normal. In the house I currently live in, my girlfriend states that for the 3 years she lived in this house, nothing happened. But when I arrived, weird things started happening. The first event in this house was when a fancy china cup slid across the counter, about a foot away from the set it was with. When we heard the noise, we got ready for battle. We thought someone was in the house trying to rob us. We believe it had to be a spirit because it would have been a physical impossibility for that thing to slide unless something pushed it. Account number 2 still freaks me out. So my girlfriend and I are relaxing in our room around midnight when it suddenly sounds like someone ran full force into the wall on the opposite side of the house. So I get up and check outside. I don't see any of my neighbors partying, so I go inside and tell my girlfriend that I couldn't find the source outside, so we should check inside. I have her stay in the bedroom while I go to the room furthest from ours. I stomp a few times in the room and ask if that was it, and she says no. So as I'm getting ready to randomly pick things up and drop them, I'm drawn to the 15-pound dumbbell in the middle of the room. As I look at the weight, I can feel this strange feeling, almost as if my senses were sharpened and I was ready for something to happen. So I raise one side of the dumbbell and drop it, and my girlfriend says that's the exact sound. Needless to say, I noped out of there and closed the door. Apparently that spirit can lift, lol. But in all seriousness, that is a lot to lift for a spirit and shouldn't be taken lightly. This took place maybe 5 years ago. I was around 17 to 18, living in the house I grew up in with my mom and my younger sister. I was a night owl at the time, so I would regularly be up at weird hours, usually going to bed around 4 in the morning. It was around 2 a.m. and I was on my laptop, probably reading some cringeworthy fanfiction as teen me tended to do, totally chill. My mom and sister had gone to bed a couple of hours prior. Suddenly, I heard someone knocking on my door. Slow, heavy, angry-sounding knocks shook the door and rattled the knob. I don't remember exactly how many times. It was like someone was pounding on it with their fist as hard as they could. I jumped out of my damn skin. I swear, I had never felt so frozen in fear before. Even my cat, who had been curled up on the blankets next to me, looked freaked out and was standing up, staring at the door with his fur all fluffed up. I knew something was really wrong right then because that lazy mofo loved his naps and wouldn't budge for anything during his nap time unless food was involved. I just sat there, staring at the door, like I was waiting for it to burst open from the force of the knocking and reveal some kind of murderer. After that last booming knock, there was total silence, but I was too scared to move right away. I gathered my wits after a couple of minutes of playing statue and grabbed a walking stick. I kept leaning against my nightstand. I opened the door at a snail's pace and then peeked into the living room, where my mom was standing out there, all wide-eyed with her phone's flashlight on. She goes, "What the hell? Was that you knocking like that?" And I told her I was about to ask her the same thing. My little sister could sleep through an earthquake, so we quickly went to check on her and found her snoring away as expected. Although my sister was, and still is, fond of pranking me, she wouldn't do something like this or give up after the scare had run its course. She's more of a plastic wrap over the toilet bowl kind of gal anyway. All the doors and windows were locked tight. Nobody broke in. It took me a long time to get to sleep that night. I'm pretty sure I crawled into my mom's bed because I was too freaked out to stay in my room. And then things went back to normal for a little while. I chalked it up to just a weird, scary thing that happened once and then forgot about it. Like 2 months later, ducking happened again. The same pounding on the door, sometimes as short as just 3 heavy knocks, sometimes I counted around 8. Each time, my door would shake like it was going to break, and the knob would turn sometimes, but the door never opened. Objects sitting on my dresser beside the door would fall to the floor from the vibrations of it. There was always a period of at least 2 weeks between these occurrences, almost like whatever was being done was purposefully waiting until I felt kind of safe before messing with me again. Whatever it was, it gave me such a bad feeling. There was never anything on the other side of the door, even when I got brave enough to leap up during the knocking to face whoever or whatever was doing it. These incidents went on for a little more than 6 months, I'd say, getting more frequent until they suddenly stopped happening. This is the scariest experience I've ever had, and thinking about it too deeply still puts me on edge. I was 15 years old. I've been to this camp since I was 10 years old. It was a Christian camp that my family attended every summer. As cliché as it sounds, it started with a dream. My dreams are normally never in first person. So I was very confused when I saw it from my own perspective, knowing I was me. I looked around, and the sky was red with shadows rolling across it. I was in a hilly area, all red. I was just standing in the middle of this strange field. I knew I wasn't in reality. I suddenly heard a powerful voice. This voice is indescribable, it held so much power. Old and ancient, unlike anything a human could produce. I stiffened, feeling all my hair stand. The voice called out again. "Cut off your toes." It repeated. A mantra until I finally spoke up. "You want me to do what?" "Cut off your toes." "Are you God?" I was Christian. I had heard of the story of Abraham and God asking him to sacrifice his son to prove his faith in God. The voice hesitated slightly. "Prove your faith to me, cut off your toes." I was a little confused but asked how to do it. It showed me a cleaver in a spot in the kitchen that I had never been in. It showed me exactly where it was. It showed a vision of me grabbing the cleaver, taking it to this stump, and cutting my toes off under the moonlight. I was completely convinced. It made sense. I would wake up and cut off my toes. God was testing my faith. As a devout follower, I was going to do what he asked of me. Trusting in God's divine knowledge. I heard barking in the real world. I began to stir, the voice told me no frantically, but I was awake. It was completely dark. I remember thinking, perfect, it's dark. I can sneak out and cut off my toes. I could still hear the barking, so I sat up. These shadows flew off my face. The room was red, like my dream. The shadows flew across the cabin, and I looked around, disoriented. My dog was hunching and snarling. He was staring at the corner. I've never seen a dog so ferocious. All his hair was standing up. I looked at the corner he was pointed at. It was a twisted, old, gnarly tree, and the energy this thing emitted was so overpowering. I was already scared and bewildered, but when I looked into its eyes, I genuinely thought I was about to die. I began to cry. I saw myself dying, being overtaken by it. I saw myself locked in a void for eternity. When it looked at me, my dog snarled again. He was lagging slightly and using his body to be in between us. The old tree looked at my dog. Every time it looked at me, my dog growled and snarled. It gave me one last glance before sinking to the floor. I watched as the shadows followed. The room was filled with sunlight. It was not like I had previously thought. I quickly got out of bed, grabbing my dog. I didn't bother getting dressed. I ran out in my pajamas, grabbing a leash quickly for my dog. I just started running from the fear keeping me going. I was surrounded by trees. I finally collapsed and just sat down, trying to collect my thoughts. My dog was licking me, trying to cheer me up. I was definitely going to cut off my toes. I felt so disoriented. I wondered if maybe I had just dreamt it all. Maybe I was just going crazy. Schizophrenia starts in your teen years. Maybe I had been possessed by a demon. I didn't want to tell anyone in fear that I'd be locked away in a psych ward or exorcised. I had to see the knife. There was no way I had ever seen it, as the only times I went in the kitchen were when I worked as a dishwasher and I only stayed in one part of the kitchen. I had never once gone to where this knife was kept. While everyone was busy with morning church, I snuck into the kitchen. The knife was exactly where it was in the vision. Throughout the day, I had other campers come up and ask me what happened in the morning. They heard my dog, many of them heard him all the way to the lake. Some came to investigate. They told me the snarls were so loud and ferocious they thought he was attacking something. They saw me running, and no one could find me until then. I had no answer, The knife had been confirmed, and now people were telling me they heard my dog. I eventually told my sister and then my mom a year or so later. I decided not to tell my brother, as he was very young and I didn't want to scare him. We went back to that camp, and every year something bad happened to me and only me. I sprained my toes. I broke my tailbone. Got lice. No one in my family caught the lice. I got a terrible stomach flu that had me puking for 12 hours. Again, my family never caught it, we were always in that same cabin. The one time we weren't, everything was peaceful for me. I haven't returned for a few years now. I decided to tell my brother because he was old enough. When I started to explain the tree demon, my brother's eyes got huge. A look of fear crossed his face, and he stopped me. He described the creature in practically perfect detail. I was puzzled. I asked if I had told him the story, and he shook his head. He asked me to finish the story, so I did. You know, there's a demon at the camp. I was confused. He proceeded to tell me the story of this demon he had heard his first year at camp. This old tree demon collected fingers. He asked if he really asked for my toes because he had always heard it was fingers. I had never heard this story before. I know for a fact I hadn't, because if I had, I would have never touched the honeymoon cabin. There's this old cabin far from all the other cabins. You have to go off trail a bit to go to this old, decrepit cabin. It's very old and the last of the first cabins built there. They always told us not to go there. The camp had told us about how it was dangerous because of broken glass or animals that could be in it. I was always fascinated by it. It had a strange energy, like when you go into a very old house and you can feel its history. I was enthralled by the history, the story of two lovers spending their first nights together in a cabin made specifically for them. I had never touched it before that year. I stupidly wanted to see what was inside it. I touched the door. My brother explained that he was warned never to touch the honeymoon cabin as the demon was bound to it. He also told me he thought that the demon couldn't come on the campgrounds. He told me he was told the campgrounds were supposed to be the safest place. I am not schizophrenic, I've never had a moment like that again. It wasn't sleep paralysis, as I've had that, and I'm not able to sit up or turn my body. My sleep paralysis always starts with me trying to breathe. My brother is autistic and has no reason to lie. Plus, the look of fear on his face when I described the demon was so genuine. My dad is a full-blooded Navajo from northern Arizona. My mom is white. I grew up in SoCal but grew up going to the res every year and eventually moved and worked there. The first experience I had was on one of my first solo trips, without my parents, out to our ranch on the reservation. I went with my cousin and a few friends. Our ranch is pretty much in the middle of nowhere, with the nearest people being at the very closest 10 miles away, so you're pretty much on your own. Our first night out there, we arrived around 2 a.m. and there was no moon and it was pitch black, so we had a hard time finding our hogan, traditional octagon-shaped Navajo house. We decided to just camp near a cattle corral, which we found. We set up tents and knocked out until the sun came up. When I woke up, I took a little walk around our campsite and found coyote tracks that encircled our camp and actually got pretty close to the tents and campfire, which was pretty weird and a bad sign for several reasons. The rest of the day went without incident. We woke up, cooked breakfast, explored the north rim of the Grand Canyon on the reservation side, and checked out old hogans in the area. We stayed up particularly late that night. We had been out exploring at night and four-wheeling on some off-road trails. It was around 2 or 3 a.m., and we were driving up a rocky road that went up into a small canyon, so there were hillsides pretty high and steep on both sides of me. I was standing in the back of the truck with a spotlight. That was when I first saw the light. The best way to describe what I saw was the visual effect when you're standing in a room and someone behind you takes a picture with a flash. There was a brief instant in which everything lit up behind me, but it was a dull orange-reddish light. I turned around towards where it came from and shined the light around, but there was nothing there whatsoever, just a bunch of rocks. We thought it was weird, but kept driving. Once on top of the hill, we stopped to look around and noticed the weird light again, but this time it was far away, at least several miles. It was the same color, but it looked like a muzzle flash from a gun. I waited and waited to hear the gunshot, thinking it was people like us shooting at night, but it never came. Then we saw another flash, but this time it was several miles to the west and a little bit closer. Then another and another, closer and closer, all within a few minutes. We decided it was a little weird, and without talking about it, we turned around and went to the hogan this time. We didn't really talk about the lights for some reason, and we all settled down in the hogan. There was myself, my cousin, and my 2 white friends. We talked for a while, and it was that moment when everyone stopped talking and everyone was just about to fall asleep when it happened. The door, there's only one door, a small wooden door that locks shut, shook violently, as if someone kicked the door as hard as they could. It was loud and strong enough that you could hear the lock rattle and the door bounce back and rattle against the wooden frame. My friend shot up in bed and said, "What the duck was that?" They had reason to be alarmed. We were very far from anyone else, and they knew that. It's extremely quiet out there, pretty much a deafening silence, and you can hear when vehicles are approaching. I got out of bed, grabbed a shotgun, and told my cousin to get his rifle. I walked to the door, motioned for him to come over, and said, "You go left, I'll go right." I'm not really sure why, but I wasn't scared despite the obvious weirdness of what was going on. I ripped the door open, and we both slipped out the door one after the other and swept the area. We looked everywhere we could, went to the truck, got the spotlight, and swept the area. Nothing. No footprints, no animals, nothing. We decided to send a message and shot some rounds off to scare whatever it was away. I think we were all kind of worried, but eventually we went back into the Hogan and settled back in, kind of joking about it to calm our nerves. Eventually they all fell asleep, but I hid my nervousness, and my heart was still racing. It wasn't until everyone was quiet and asleep that I noticed the thumping. I heard it very faintly through the rock walls, and when I put my ear to the wall, I heard it a lot better. It was a very rhythmic, thumping sound. Something very heavy, and timed the same every single thump. It sounded as if it were coming through the rock table that the Hogan sits on top of. I tried to rationalize it and told myself it was just the cows, and somehow I managed to fall asleep. I woke up the next morning, and we went to check on the cows, which were about 10 miles away on the ranch and hadn't been anywhere near our Hogan that night. Several days later, after I told my aunts about what happened, they told me that one of my Navajo grandmas, who lived alone and out in the middle of nowhere, had a weird thing happen too. The same night we had our door kicked, someone had knocked on her door in the middle of the night. When she opened the door, there was no one there. My aunts think it was a skinwalker who was messing with me and my cousin because we're mixed.